Let's take a look at Lingua's writing assignment functionality. This allows teachers to easily create writing assignments based on topics, vocabulary, and grammar covered in class, students to receive detailed analysis on their writing performance, and teachers to see insights on how students performed on the writing. Now, let's say I wanted my students to write an interview with a health professional. Let me add in the title, the topic, and then the text type, which is a format of the writing. Now, I can either create the writing prompt by writing myself, or I can generate it with AI. And you see here's a prompt that's been generated based on these topics provided, as well as the level of the course, which in this case, it's Spanish 5. So it's going to be pretty advanced. If I create my own one, I can enhance it with AI, which will make it a better, more fully fleshed out writing prompt. I can also add a suggested word count, which is a range that the students should try to stick to for their writing. I can also add a word limit, which is a hard cutoff where the student is not allowed to write anything more than this limit. Otherwise, they'll not be able to submit the assignment. I can also add a time limit, which is a timer that after this time runs out, the writing will be automatically submitted. And then, as usual, I can add key vocabulary terms and grammar concepts, as well as special grading instructions. These are instructions such as grade vocabulary more leniently or grade grammar more strictly, instructions that will be provided to the AI when it's grading to make sure the grading for the writing aligns with the way that you want it to be graded. Additionally, there's two extra options over here. The first one is secure testing mode. Secure testing mode is a functionality that locks down the student's computer so they can only focus on the assignment. The student is not allowed to switch tabs or leave the web page, and if they do, this activity will be monitored and logged for you as the teacher to see. This is a great option for you to enable if you want the assignment to be a quiz or a test. The second option here is Quetzalita Writing Assistant. Quetzalita is an AI writing assistant that will help the student plan out their draft, formulate their ideas into writing, and refine and edit their work before submission. Quetzalita guides students through the writing process without giving them entire sentences or paragraphs to write, ensuring that the student is actively learning and the writing is their own work. I have a slightly different prompt over here now, and I'm going to launch the assignment. You can see on the assignment page here some details about the assignment. You can also edit the assignment if you would like. And now let's take a look at it from the student's perspective. So now the student can open up this assignment, and then they see a description of the assignment here. Just like usual, they can choose their background music, and then let's start the writing. So this is the writing editor page. The student can enter in their writing over here. They can add accents as necessary. And then if they don't know what a word means, they can highlight over it in the writing prompt. And if you've enabled translations, they can see the translation. They can also add it to their personal vocab list. Now I'm going to put in here a sample writing that a student could write. This includes some vocabulary and grammar errors as well as some structural issues, so we can see how the autograder grades this work. Now let's submit the writing. And we see here the student is awarded the same Lingua points and skill points as usual. And then this autograder is going to grade the work and give the student constructive feedback. So we see here that the student did well on format and style. They had some minor vocabulary issues and some grammar issues, and they did well on cohesiveness. So essentially, the student is graded on these 4 different categories, each assessing a different core aspect of writing. So a student can see some comments on how they performed in each of these categories. They can also see if they didn't score 5 out of 5, they can see a tip on how to improve this skill. They can also click on this, which will generate a markup of exactly all the errors they made and what they did well, and also how to fix the errors. So you can see here in green, it highlights all the things that the student did well with. For example, this is grammar. So what the student did well with grammar, and then red highlights the issues, the grammatical issues they made, and then yellow shows the fixes for those. They can also see click this button to show all the errors and corrections, which will show all the different types of errors that the student made. It'll highlight them in red and then show them how to fix it. So we see that here. And then, of course, the student is also able to see their overall strengths and weaknesses so they know what to focus on. And then they're also graded here. They see their total score. So the student got a 17 out of 20, which is their score. Back on in the teacher's end, we can see the average skill points earned for all the students have completed so far. And then this performance insights tab, we can see here, there's two categories here. One thing is the category analysis, which shows insights based on each individual category, how students performed in each of those categories. Let's generate the analysis. So we see here that across all students, we can see how the students performed and also some information on, on their performance and where they need to improve. We can also generate these insights as normal. It'll give you the strengths and weaknesses across all students' submissions for this assignment. On the individual submission here, we can take a look at the student's performance and see the same feedback and grading that the student saw. We can also edit the score if you think the grading was not exactly the way that you would like it to be. You can change the score. And you can also edit the actual grading itself if you disagree with it. One more thing to mention, the submissions tab, is you have the option to, when you export the grades for Canvas, you can export them for accuracy or completion. This will export it as a CSV so that you can import it into Canvas for that assignment, and then all the students' grades will be populated there. So accuracy just means it'll export this score that the student got. This is great for like tests and quizzes. Completion is just, as long as the student submitted something, they're going to get 100%. So if you want to do just a practice writing assignment for your class, this would be a good option. Now let's take a look at how the Quetzalita AI writing assistant helps students with their writing. Over on the student's end, if you've enabled Quetzalita, it'll show up here that it's enabled. To access Quetzalita, the student can click this button over here. And so Quetzalita can help them do a bunch of different things. One of the things is plan out their writing when they're starting. So I can ask, and Quetzalita will provide some constructive sort of the thought process and on how the student should go about planning the writing. So it's asking what types of sections you typically see in in an interview type of writing. So you can say something like um, title. You can also ask it like what types. And it'll give you some ideas on which like what vocabulary, what topics to focus on so you can best plan out your writing. Once the student has written some of their writing, they can also ask Quetzalita for input on how to revise and improve the writing. So, for example, so it's going to say so what some of the strengths are and what some of the issues are that the student needs to improve on. So this is a good way for students to understand what their weaknesses are and improve their work so that it's the best possible writing and so that they're actively learning throughout the writing process. Now let's take a look at the secure testing mode. So you can see here that the browser is in a lockdown mode where the student has to focus on their work. They cannot navigate to any other tab. If they do, then it gives a warning here that the tab switch is detected, and this will be logged for the student for the teacher to see afterward. Especially if they do it multiple times, you'll see that multiple times are logged. So if the student is not allowed to navigate to any other page. If the student has to leave for an emergency, they can do an emergency quit, where they can leave the test if it's an emergency, and then this will also be logged for you to see as a teacher, so you can make the decision on whether it was an academic honesty issue, or it was just a genuine emergency, and you can communicate with the student for that. And we see here on the student submission, there are warnings for leaving the tab and emergency quit. And we see here there's a warning that tab switch is detected, there's been an emergency quit, and we can change the student's score accordingly if we would like to. So that wraps it up for writing assignments. Thank you for watching.